Hello, lovely beings. I'm JJ Rose, and with me today is a very special guest that I get to call friend. You might know him as Chasing Mound Builders on YouTube and all the socials, and his Substack, Mythic Scribe, or just might know him as Philip. Welcome, my dear.
Thank you for having me. I
Of
appreciate it. That was a
course.
nice of you to say.
Well, I have been looking forward to this conversation for a hot minute, so this is going to be fun. Um, we have so many places and things that we're going to cover in this, but primarily what I wanted to start out with, since you and I both know a lot about the Gnostic Gospels, and you specifically with Hermeticism, and you just being a brainiac of information across the board historically and into the esoteric, which I love. I want to start out with a place that you and I had a fun little tete-a-tete conversation with the other day. And that is why I keep telling people to know themselves. And you and I had a little differing views at first, but we ended up at the same conclusion. It's just we got there a little bit in different ways. And so I'm going to state my part first, and then I would love for you to counter and
Okay.
us to share that with the audience a little bit, because I think it's very important for people to understand where I'm coming from, but also some of the pitfalls as well as where you're coming from on that journey of knowing
Sure.
themselves and learning overall who you are within the all. So, from my perspective, when you know yourself, when you understand who you are, what you stand for, what your values are, what your pros are, what your cons are, one could say where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, you are able to better navigate life. You're better able to self reflect as well as just be a better person. So if I know I have an issue with XY social factor, then for instance, I know when I'm in those situations, I'm going to be maybe a little more conscientious of what I'm saying or what I'm doing because I know that perhaps that tends to be an issue. And then from there, once you know yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, that's when you can start developing yourself more and then get yourself to the point where you not only know yourself and your foundation, and as I told you earlier, if you don't have a strong foundation, you don't have strong legs, then you're going to fall for anything. And
Hmm.
this is where we come into having a very firm foundation of who you are, knowing what your morals and values are, your backbone, and who you are, and how then you fit into the all, the collective, and what you can do to serve the collective in the bigger picture, as well as maybe what you probably shouldn't sign up for just yet, or what you need more training on.
Right.
I would love you to expand
Sure.
upon a little bit about what originally, when we had this conversation, your wariness. Now, for the audience, we had this conversation via message. So this was all written back and forth. And of course, we weren't as eloquent with all the words because we were happily typing. But in order to understand where each other was at, and I love the fact that you came back to me with a few times and kept saying, wait, hold on. I don't necessarily recommend this for everyone. So
Yeah.
go off, King.
Well, uh, yeah. I mean, that's a good chat, and I think that's like the best kind of conversation when people can kind of like say, I don't know, I like want that so bad for people to. You'll see me in forums everywhere, like typing something and or correcting someone, and it comes off as maybe it's the autism, but it comes off as like I am certain, and I want to like say as a caveat before I say anything that I'm definitely not certain of anything. I'm definitely only certain of a path that works for me. And this is a very Jungian idea in that everyone's path is going to look different. If it looks like someone else's, it's probably the wrong one, right? So,
Absolutely.
with that being said, it is very it can be dangerous for people to embark on a journey in terms of depth psychology and the real work of shadow work, because that's my real issue with the concept, is when it's referred to as shadow work, because what shadow work is very specific, versus I think what you're talking about is more of like a cognitive behavioral therapy type of, like, very generalized, which we should be teaching people in kindergarten. Like, this is not something that we spend near enough time on.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we arrived there. Like, I agree. Like, in a general basis, like, we kind of found that like confluence of, like, definitely on a basic level people should be learning this. Um, but it's the depth psychology specifically that I would caution people looking into, because what you uncover in a process like that is not um, run of the mill. It's not. You're not going to learn necessarily much about the morals and the values, but how amoral you really are,
Mhm.
how compromised your values have been and will potentially continue to be. If you're not willing to um, have a real crisis with a professional, I always say that, like, definitely, if you're going to do shadow work, find a professional, um, and really start that process there, because that is something and you can uncover things that you just wish you hadn't. And
And,
and so, from a general esoteric standpoint, when you dive into, like, the mysteries and just the questions about consciousness and stuff like that, that's disorienting enough. And if someone is in crisis, and there are many ways to be in crisis, it looks like a lot of different things. um, I was in crisis for many years, and I didn't know how to sort of find my compass for that, but therapy did that. And so, when like when I advocate for knowing yourself, I mean, for God's sake, go to therapy. Everyone. If you don't think you need it, you definitely do.
yeah.
And so, there is no stigma. Don't let people try to dissuade you from it. Definitely talk therapy. Find a good one, obviously. Want someone you're compatible with, and someone who will call you on your bullshit. And yeah, but like, it's the deeper sort of Jungian type of thing that I dissuade people from, like, advocating, because it's not. I think it simultaneously makes light of the work, and it also can be dangerous in the wrong hands, um, because what you'll see when you get into shadow work and, like, knowing the internal of it and that inner um, sort of journey, if you're doing, like, active imagination sessions and stuff like that, what you'll find is that there are parallels that connect to everything else, to history, to religion, to symbolism, and it can tear your mind apart. It really can, if you're not grounded and you're not with somebody who's very, very professional.
And I agree with you. And so I'm going to harken back to a story because language, as we both know, changes quite often. And I have had a
Mm-hmm.
large issue with this because, I come in from an older generation. I was trained by people who were older. So I'm using that vernacular, that vocabulary. So years ago, a good friend of mine approached my best witch and I. She said, "Hey, so I just heard about this group and it's a whole bunch of ladies and they're gonna start doing shadow work together. What do you girls think?" And like we looked at each other and we freaked out and both of us said, "Absolutely not." Now, mind you, this person, is a little bit younger, doesn't know themselves completely. Like, we freaked out, like as older witches, we were like, girl, no, you haven't passed go yet. And then she's very confused.
Yeah.
I wasn't even on the TikTok yet. My bird laugh, that was cute. Thank you. Um, so I mean, this is before I even got on TikTok, so I didn't know what the kids were calling it. And so I said, okay, well, wait, hold on, because you're giving me this look as if I just told you, like, don't look before you cross the street both ways. And so she started to
Mhm.
explain what quote unquote shadow work was that was going to be in this class. And then
Mhm.
we, confusedly looked at one another and said, oh, well, that's just getting to know yourself. That's not what
Mhm.
you and I are calling shadow work. So, word on the street is
Right.
all the kids are saying shadow work, which is basically a lightweight term for getting to know yourself and getting to know kind of the darker aspects of yourself. And, like you said, seeing
Mhm.
where maybe you have been amoral. And, I know there are churches who will advise people to do this. I don't know how deep it necessarily goes. I haven't been to every church, but they will talk about looking within. And then if you've gone through any kind of, AA derivative program, all of them also talk about doing an extensive inventory of oneself. And that's you kind of having to look
Mhm.
yourself in the face and saying, okay, I have to own up to the fact that I did all this stuff, whether I was in addiction, whether it was a choice, whether it was that's all I knew how to do at the time. And that is very different than the shadow work you and I are talking about. The shadow work you and I are talking
Mhm.
about is a much deeper and comprehensive understanding of ourself. So for me, when I say know yourself, it's basically like the kids are saying shadow work now, but it is for you to understand morally where you stand, what is important to you, what do you think of the world and how people should be, yourself should be. And then also you have to look at that reflection. How have I acted within that reflection? Am I acting that way? Or am I telling everyone, oh, we should all be like this? And then I'm going and doing the exact opposite. And then you have to own it. And when
Yeah.
it comes to crisis, 100%. If you are knee deep in addiction, if you are going through something major and emotional in your life, or if you are unstable, whether that's mental health wise, financially, or there's lots of different ways we can be unstable in life, even hormonally, right? As a female, I can say that, like,
Mhm.
pick your timing. Maybe in the middle of menopause isn't the exact time to, break open Pandora's
Yeah.
of everything. Um, but that being said, I
Or
do,
like a 17-year-old boy who's like testosterone up.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
not the guy you want doing shadow work necessarily.
No, or the amped up, 25-year-old on steroids and Monster Energy drinks. Like, maybe not, pick your timing. So,
Right.
but that being said, I also get where you're coming from, being that you and I are more purists in our linguistic lingo in talking about true shadow work of okay, so you know yourself, you've owned up to the parts of you that maybe you need to adjust some things in life or just accept them and move on.
Yeah.
And then you get to the point where you understand how you fit into the all. And this is, I think, the part that you were being a little cautious on. And I myself have even talked about people going into spiritual psychosis. It is very, very
Mhm.
easy if you chose the fast track path to dip into spiritual psychosis quickly if you don't
Yeah.
understand yourself and have a basic knowledge of spiritual or esoteric terms and an understanding of these things. It's very easy to start, going on social media and seeing some of these reels, and then all of a sudden you think the reptilians are eating everybody and controlling the world and walking around in people's skin
Mhm.
suits. And it's very easy to be taken for a ride.
You mean they're not?
Yeah, all right, you know what? I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go there. You flip my switch. Let me talk on it. Here's where I'm at with the reptilian thing. And I know I've talked about this lately, through the years, but I saw someone who I really, really respected who, has a channel. They're pretty big. I don't know them personally, but I would see what they would talk about. I would agree with most of it. I thought everything was going well. And then they went down the reptilian track, and I was like, great, that's done. Here's my issue with the reptilian thing. That is spiritual bypassing 101. If you're going to blame humans doing bad and awful things on some exterior force, you're not owning up to the fact that humans have and always historically have some faction been awful and evil in some aspect. I'm not saying all of them, but there have always been disgusting, vile, gross, evil, heinous people who do awful, horrible things. If you read the Old Testament alone, okay, and historically, to just blame all of that on these, giant reptilians who apparently are able to fit into human skin suits, that part really confuses me, by the way. Um, just saying, from like a whole,
I
where's the
mean,
tail?
yeah, why not? Why not? Right?
Yeah, I have questions, is all I'm saying, but I'm not here to
Yeah,
get those answered. But I feel like that's spiritual bypassing, and it's also a scapegoat. It's too easy to blame it on that. It's also something that's really bugged me about the churches of everything is a demon or everything is evil. No, I mean, uh, if you've read the Old
yeah.
Testament, I got questions.
So,
You know what I'm saying?
oh, for sure. And that's like, I wouldn't call it spiritual bypassing so much as I would call it, you can be spiritually bypassing and have that literal interpretation of what the serpent is and what the reptilian sort of motif is across time. But what it really seems like to me is just this association with darkness, with with things that don't. It's unwarranted. I can speak on this semi uniquely because um, I have been visited by reptilian. So, and this is I've been on shows before and like talked about it, and like it's so hard to get across to people that like, do I consider it to have been real? And when I say yes, I mean experientially, that's real.
Yeah.
Um, was it? Could anyone else have seen it had they been standing there? I don't know. I can't speak from that perspective, but I can say that well, I don't feel the need to like lump that in with a negative, and that's my real thing is that if we are assuming that there are people that are reptilian in nature, and I believe that we are, and it's all through history, the Nagas, the
There's a
you
part of
know
our brain that's
the
literally called the reptilian brain.
yeah the seraphim, which were like fiery serpent like winged angels essentially,
Do not be
and there's like
afraid.
there's like this linguistic link. Right, yeah. But these are not like there's no culture where it's uniquely bad. And in fact, it's just such a weird demonized thing. And so if there are people and don't get me wrong, I believe there's a cabal of or factions that are sort of hell bent on control and abuse of power and their own lineages. Are some of them reptilian? I don't know. But it's like the thing that I keep hearing when like people tell me like if you see a reptilian, you just say the Lord's name and they flee. And I say, well, you know, first of all, a lot of people would argue that Jesus might have been one of these Nagas, what might have been of the lineage of one of these instantiations of the serpent motif. So, and that's not like baseless. That's all over history. That's, like he tells you in the Bible to be as wise as the serpent. They're experimenting with serpent venom based drugs and cocktails of medicine back then. And we still do that today. If
Snake
you're on a
oil.
statin for cholesterol,
Hmm.
that's synthesized from viper venom. So like the serpent really gets a bad rap. The reptilian in general is just like this overhyped sort of nonsense almost, because it's like, because someone would be reptilian, especially a shapeshifter, to think that they wouldn't be as deserving of compassion as another being is just silly to me. And
Yes.
so yeah, I mean, I do get tired. I think you're like fatigued with it like I am, where
Oh,
it's
I am
like
over it.
I can't keep watching these people talk about the book of Enoch and shit, you know, because it's like it's like the giant. Everyone wants to talk to me about the giants when they hear I talk about mounds. It's the same thing. It's like, yeah, but and inevitably they use the word Nephilim, and it's like, okay, but you're putting terminology from a culture where it doesn't necessarily belong onto things that have maybe nothing to do with it. And I understand that like sometimes it's just a faster way of like communicating between people, but it's also irresponsible to like just lump everything in. And I believe there were giants. I do. I mean, it's not even a real hot take that there were giants. I mean, it's all, the literature is all out there. But
Well, we went through
do
the
I call
Jurassic
them the
period.
Nephilim?
Yeah, there was
Right.
the Jurassic
Exactly.
period. Everything was big. So it makes sense that people would have been big. I mean, a cockroach was the size of a
Yeah.
VW bug, for the love of God. Like, come on, man. So does it make sense that humans would have been like 4 and 5 feet? No, because they would have been considered like pixies, which I'm not saying that pixies don't exist, but like, let's think
Mhm.
about this logically.
Right.
And I am eventually going to do a video about the time before time and the people before people, and I'll explain some of this. I just need to pick my timing with it. I get kind of riled up from some of this stuff because it is so overused. It is so misunderstood, and you have a lot of people who have just read something from, 2 weeks ago, and then they go off saying all sorts of ridiculousness, and then people spiral. And again, the only reason people are spiraling is because they don't have any set foundation. I have a Bible from the 1800s. I'm able to read the Bible from the 1400s, right? The ones that weren't given to the people, but that were transcribed, because I can read Old English, because I can read a whole bunch of languages. And when you read those, the verbiage is much different than the watered down stuff you get today. And let's just say a couple things. King James Bible,
Mhm.
it has 66 chapters. Catholic Bible has 73. The Ethiopian Bible has 77. Anybody see any issue with 66 versus 70? That's 11 chapters that are missing. And then
Yeah.
we have the Gnostic
I
text.
thought it was 88, but I could be wrong.
Oh, no, it's 77. And there might,
Okay.
but when you add in the Gnostic text, there's probably even more than that, right? So when you start
That we
looking
know of,
back,
yeah.
yeah, and then when you start looking back historically, like in the Bible I have from the early 1800s, when it talks about the giants, the word was men of renowned. It did not mean literal big old people. Men of renowned
Mm.
versus ginormous people is a whole different thing. And also,
Yeah.
we have, David versus the Cyclops. When did he become a Cyclops? When did that happen? Like now we're meshing in like Homer and the Bible, and then don't even get me started on, the current day version of we're all going to go burn in hell, which was basically Dante's Inferno that someone decided like, okay, cool. Let's make this a thing in order to teach in church. But if you don't have that historical knowledge,
Right.
you're not going to know any of that, right? And so then we have someone like you
Correct.
who does actually read the historical stuff and is able to put in these different cultures into perspective. And then you're just like drowning
Oh,
in
I
it,
don't I
like,
don't know.
oh,
That's giving me too much credit because I honestly like there are so many heavy hitters that like are doing this that kind of work, and I'm just like a fly on the wall of their house, like soaking in all this stuff, and I pay homage
well,
to the
you're the
places
fly
that
in
I
front of me, and I get it that you're humble, but
well well I say that because really I mean like I find myself like saying things sometimes, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's like verifiably wrong, and I'm like I have to go back because I guess it's like for example, like I read books in threes. I don't know why I do it. It's just what I do. I always have three going, and as soon as I finish one, I add another one into the group of three. And so there's a thing where like I take in so much that sometimes my wires are crossed, and I welcome people saying, "Hey, this thing you said here was that's stupid," because I need to know because I'm like I might be stupid and on a certain thing and it so I mean as far as like the history, yeah, like I love the Nag Hammadi library. I have it right here sitting next to me. It's
nice.
open.
Yay.
It's I'm reading. I was just reading Secret Book of John, one of my favorites about the fall of Sophia. And you know, and I look at all this symbolically. I don't look at it as for example, the David and Goliath, and if there was a Cyclops element to it, I look at that as this person was of narrow vision versus being an actual Cyclops. And when you say giant, I look at it to mean someone with status, a war hero, perhaps.
Men of
Um,
renowned. That's what that means.
right, exactly. So using that terminology, like you said, it's all different from the original texts, from what we know, and then you're relying on translation. You're relying on the sort of veracity of the scribes at the
Mhm.
time, which varies. I mean, there's a lot of variance. There's people that say that when Marsilio Ficino transcribed the Hermetic literature for the king, that it was like rushed and pushed out, and a lot of bullshit was added, and that could be true. Who knows? There's a lot of different sort of thing. You got to know who to trust as far as translation. Nothing is better than learning the languages yourself to
Yes.
at least read them to a level where you can translate. I myself am trying to learn Greek right now.
Yeah, and
Um,
I had a friend
Not
who
easy,
really learned.
especially like the Mycenaean.
Oh, yeah. I mean, don't, yeah. Because again, language changes. I had a friend who learned ancient, uh,
Mhm.
what was it? Aramaic. And she read the Bible in its original form. And she said, honey, we got a lot wrong. And and it is true that language develops and it changes, right? The meanings of things. I mean, think of when we were growing up, right? The meanings
Sure.
of some of the words that we used to say, cool or badass or bad, literally meant good. And now if you say that,
Mhm.
people are like, well, what's bad about it? Like, whoa, 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 hold on. Like, let's change
Right.
our verbs. So, but you bring up a good point about knowing who to trust with translations as well as information. and history. If you think about the mortality rate of people and how it's changed over the years, right? So I think right now, currently, it's around like 78 to 81 years old, right? That the average person mortality
Yeah,
rate will live. Okay, well, back in the
more or less.
1400s, 1200s, older than that, it was much less. It was like 35 to 45. So, and then you also
The
have the
Dark
issue,
Ages.
yeah. And then you also have the issue where age was not counted on a solar calendar until a certain time, and we don't necessarily know when that was. So when it talks about people being
Hmm.
7, 8, 900 years old, that could have been moon cycles. We don't know when it switched from lunar to solar.
Right.
And so then you have,
Hmm.
people going around thinking, oh, these people were ancient. And then all of a sudden, a gene got knocked off. And I'm not saying that isn't true. It totally is. But there, how do we know that people lived for 1,000 years before versus a
There's no
thousand
way
lunar
for us to
cycles?
know. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are a lot of little things that can change big stories, right? That we've been fed throughout our life. But then there are certain constants. And so when you look at Christ consciousness, when you look at from various other ancient religions, I'm sorry, my bird is having a moment right now.
It's all good.
You need to calm down, child. Okay. And this is why we edit. Uh, so when you when you look at various different religions and older parts of knowledge and you start thinking about what do they all have in common? What's the constant, right? And what would you say the consistency is?
I mean, that would depend on the time period and the
Well, the themes,
the
the
culture.
constant themes.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of themes that are similar. If you mean in terms of like the messianic tradition, like related to Christ, from like the larger, like the broadly Jewish um, diaspora over centuries, you're going to get some different things than say somewhere else. But it's almost always about you know the union of opposites.
Mhm.
Really is kind of like the most common motif. That's what Jesus was, right? That's what Serapis was. There's another linguistic tie-in to the serpent is
Yeah.
the seraph or um, the Sarah in Hebrew, and Serapis, which was the god that was unified in Alexandria, which some people think was turned into Christ and adopted by the Orthodoxy to sort of like and then of course smash out the rest of the Christian sort of or at least label them heretics and give people a reason to kill them. But that's there's a lot of motifs. I'd say like the above and the below, which was a corruption, and it was a obvious corruption when you look far back enough into like when they burned down the Serapeum, um, which had a huge portion of the Library of Alexandria in it. Like this is not a small loss. This is a
No,
huge
it's
loss, and
actually
like
the greatest loss in
you,
our recorded
that
history
type,
for me.
oh yeah, easily.
That was in
But the
our
motif
recorded
of like
history.
yeah, but there's a lot of shared things. I mean, you have um, the elements are a big one. The There's a lot of math in the Bible, and I'm not quite sure if people understand that in terms of like the creation story, for example, and the origin
Mhm.
story, and like why 7 days? Why was it one split into two? Why did you divide the heavens from the earth? Why
Mhm.
do that in the first place? There's a lot of like Aristotle, for example, like his big thing was like observance and experience and looking at natural things and seeing the ability to make inferences about the nature of reality based on these, you know, observations of things that are seemingly um, just kind of you wouldn't necessarily connect, especially today, because we don't live in that world where people flex that muscle. But I think like I don't know. There's a lot of history that seems like there there's motifs and themes that kind of blend together, but then some of them stand out as obvious. I mean, you have that we need a savior at all is one of them. I mean, it's
Mhm.
and I would believe that's unchristlike to a certain extent because that I'm aware of the only time Christ in the Bible, and tell me if I'm wrong, again, not a biblical scholar, but John, the book of John, maybe is the only time Christ's divinity is sort of claimed. But, you know, Christ didn't, as far as I know, mention anything about being a savior for anyone,
No,
but that you can develop this sort of noose where you understood you had that spark within you, and this is what he told. For example, in the secret book of John, this is what was told to John is that like you have the spark of Sophia. We were woken up and given the epinoia, and that epinoia is really just epistemology. So that's like us being able to think about thinking. Um, and there's a lot of like mixed up uh, sort of themes in it all, but it I think that I don't know if I answered your question, but I find myself rambling, but
you did a great job. I would say for sure with a lot of what you said. And then to add on to it, yes, Christ did say, not only in the book of Thomas, but also in the regular book that is accepted canon, you all have the answer right in front of you. You just can't see it. And the answer is within. And then Jesus also
mhm,
said, greater things than I, all of you can do. So he was basically saying, you don't
mhm,
need me. I'm just here to remind you all of the things that you are capable of doing. And then when you take him back towards the Essene tradition, that was all about understanding that and developing that. And then the mystical traditions. And then going, with all of the ancient quote unquote religions or what we would consider to be religions, because at one point archaeology said everything was a religion. All people, all they did around all day was just religion stuff. Um, okay. um, but when you
which
put
in a
all
way is
the,
it makes sense. But,
I mean, yes, but people also had to shop and do regular things too. So, but when you take a look at all of them,
feed
yes,
them
the
drugs.
number one thing that you will see in all of them is duality. And duality is
Mhm,
there is good and there is bad. There's up, there's down, right? There's wrong, there's right. But there is a reason for that. And that goes into part of the human experience. And in order for us to grow in this world, in this life, in this experience, we have to have adversity. And I've often said humans do not grow, unfortunately, well or quickly if they're happy and comfortable and everything is good. They have to have some adversity in order to push them. And when you even go back to Genesis with the Adam and Eve story, which is
mhm,
completely bonkers when you actually pull yourself out of any religious thought process, right? And just look at this as I'm going to tell you a story. So there are these two people and they live in this garden. And there's this older dude with all the power who basically tells them, "Hey, you can do anything you want in this garden except pick the fruit of this one tree. You can do anything you want. Just don't touch that one tree." And they say, "But why? Why
Leave it
can't we touch
alone.
that tree?" "Because that tree is going to make you like me and give you wisdom, and I can't be having all that." Okay, who's the good guy and the bad guy in the story? And then you have this quote unquote serpent around the tree being like, "Psst, psst, psst, come here. You guys eat from the tree." Like it's totally cool. You should
Yeah.
eat from this tree because hello. And then they eat from the tree. And then the big guy who was controlling them all of a sudden can't see them anymore, doesn't know where they
Hmm.
are because now they're on the same level. Why are we not questioning this? And the people that did got kicked out of Sunday school real early, let me tell you
Yeah.
from experience. Uh,
Yeah.
as well as, and or the churches won't come back to my house anymore because I'm like, okay, you want to talk? I have a question. And then all of a sudden they decide to leave. I'm like, is it something I said? So when I had heard this whole thing about the Brotherhood of the Snake, and I got really excited because it is an actual ancient tradition. And it was the understanding that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was actually the good guy, and that the other one, um, that is talked about as being God in the Old Testament, was actually the bad guy. And I have not been shy about saying that is completely true.
Mhm.
And I got super duper excited that this was going to make a resurgence and it was going to come back and people were going to talk about it. And then, bam, right after that came out in public view, it was on a show that we've all watched. I'm not going to drop the name of it. And this was years ago. Right after that came out, and people started thinking, all of a sudden the reptilian stuff came out. All of a sudden that was being thrown everywhere like a shock and awe campaign in everyone's faces of
Right.
reptilians, bad, bad, bad. Listen, yes, reptiles, they're cold blooded. That means that they need the sun and the warmth in order to heat their blood, right? It doesn't mean that they're mean and evil. I have
Mhm.
turtles. I've been around snakes and lizards and lots of reptiles in my life, and I could tell you that they show love, they have compassion, they have feeling. They, I, my turtle cried when my other turtle passed away and we had a funeral. We brought him with us for the burial and he was crying. You're going to tell me that that little animal
Yeah.
is evil just because he's a reptile? Come on, man.
Well, they're possessing of consciousness like anything.
Yeah. But also, I feel like we just need to think a little bit harder about things in general. And I understand not everyone has completely deconstructed yet. And I'm not asking everyone to, just asking people to ask questions. If things don't make sense and you ask a question and you're shut down for asking a question, is that the best place for you to be? Is that a learning and fostering environment for you, your heart, your soul, and your connection with source? Whether you want to
Yeah.
call it God or whatever it is, when I hear people say, "Oh God," I'm like, which one? So, um,
Right. Yeah. Which
I
Bible?
refer
Which, yeah.
exactly. I mean, there's a lot of gods. So for myself, I refer to it as source, right? The thing that we've all come from.
Hmm.
And I know in older traditions it's called many, many other things, but I feel like it's extremely important for people to ask questions. So, what are some questions that you've asked that you had your world spin more than a few times from deep diving?
Oh, I would say that like I don't know about a question per se that rocked me, but like just what I've learned is the most important is to maintain, your faculty of curiosity. Curiosity is the driving force behind all learning. Um, if you find someone that you're learning from and they have a problem with telling you, I don't know, run away.
Yep.
Um, this is a thing, and I've learned a lot from diving on things, and I wasn't always practicing in my curiosity. There were the days before when, okay, so let me use an overly generalized term and say an awakening, um,
Hmm.
a midlife crisis, my sort of like entering in the wheel of samsara, like my knowledge of that brought me from the mounds to religious studies and history and all this stuff. And I was guided literally by something else to this study. And I didn't want, like, this is something I was dragged screaming into. So, but now I'm glad, I'm so glad. And, but I would say that, like, it's just the faculty of curiosity is so important, and understanding that what I don't know, um, and that, like, every question that I answer, that I find an answer for, opens three more questions. That is like the core of what I'm doing. And I am involved, of course, with the Holy Hermetic Heterodox Heresy. Shout out to DRX Wilkie and DRX Chris Gass. They're killers, but we, that's the one thing that we appreciate in each other, is just the ability to kind of look at things without a lens of certainty. If you can, if you can land on something and say, well, it's okay that I don't know that, and it's okay that we can't know that. Um, you know, the study of the past is exactly that. We can take what people have written at face value. We can use like tools that historians use and classicists use to sort of suss out something that might be erroneous with a translation or a scribal error. Um, we know that all these religions appeal to antiquity when they don't. For example, I didn't know that until I started diving. I didn't realize that scholars every day are pushing the Old Test, the Pentateuch, closer and closer to the third century BCE, which means that's contemporary with Plato. And they're even saying now that his sort of like explanation of things, like in his dialogues, how Genesis seems to like latch onto it almost word for word in some areas. And so what you have is like these sort of Hellenized Jews that latched on to the greats like Plato, and it made sense to have this central figure based on that doctrine. Like, we must have the central figure, and it must be all the way good, even if what the actions of the this thing do are not good. You
Hmm.
know, we can agree that it was unkind for him to tell, was it King Saul, to smash the babies on the rock? Like, we can agree that that is horrific.
Hmm.
But I think there's a very symbolic message there in that. So if what God does is good, then it's a matter of non-duality. You have to think of the grossest example of something you can do, like selling your daughter for whatever, or smashing a baby on rocks. Like, you have to be able to consider that and say, what do you, what does one gain from this?
Hmm.
And that's really, I think, where they were going with that. And non-duality is so um, unpopular, and for good reason. It's it's like the worst of the worst, and people just can't. It's like we were talking about earlier, separating the I from the idea. And can you, like, think about a thing without attaching your moral framework or your conception of yourself to that idea. And I think we need to get back to that for sure.
Agree 100%. And this is something that when I try to explain my mode of thinking with people of how certain deities have worked or how certain entities work, like for instance, with demons, people are like, oh, I just, this shadow figure showed up and I just kicked it out. I said,
Mm,
did you bother asking what it was before you kicked it out? Did you bother light blasting it first and seeing if it came in peace? Because I've had things show up that were dark before and it wasn't evil.
mm,
I've had things show up because that's just what it looks like. I've had I- I've had things show up
right.
that are, for our human standards, pretty grotesque looking. They're not bad.
Mhm,
That's just what they look like, right? They're just different than us.
right.
I mean, I don't know. People are gonna laugh. You've heard my potato bug story before, but I never seen a potato bug, okay, ever in my whole life. I'd heard about them, but no one had ever explained to me what they look like. I don't even know what I thought it was, to be honest. So I go outside one day and I see this giant creature, and I mean, it was dead, right? Like something had either dropped it or eaten part of it or whatever. But there was enough of it that like I could make out about what it was. And I came in the house screaming that obviously there was a dead alien in the front yard because what is that? And like no, I was shooketh. Okay. Like I'm definitely downplaying my overreaction.
Yeah, like I'm
Um,
just going to bed.
yeah, I was like, so we need to call NASA and this is a flight of the navigator situation. Like someone has dropped something off and it didn't survive. And we might be radiated. And so I whoever was at my house at the time came out and looked and they're like, "Oh, dude, it's just a potato bug." And I was like, "But I'm sorry, what?" So, but you don't know what you don't know, right? So like I was like,
Yeah,
that is first of all,
yeah,
if that's a potato bug, it makes a lot of sense because like potatoes are fairly
yeah,
large and so are these things. So of course I look it up, on Google and I see what a potato bug actually looks like. And I'm like, oh, it's a potato bug. Call off the infantry. Right? But again,
right.
you don't know what you don't know. Now, just because that thing
Mm.
was hideous to me doesn't mean that it's evil. It just means it's shocking or it's jarring. So I had this a couple times where they were minor negative attachments, right? Of things that I was called in. I had done all my vetting to make sure that the person was in a good mind space for this work. There weren't, mental health issues, all the things that I do to make sure it's proper to work with somebody. And so I go in and, again, I always feel like if you go in and you're somewhat polite and respectful, I know I can handle myself in that situation. I've been trained most of my life for that. I was called to do this work. So obviously I wouldn't be called to do this work and like
Mm.
not know how to handle myself. So, I show up and the thing basically kind of looks at me and one of it literally just kind of shrugged its shoulders and I said, "So it doesn't want you here, but before you," and it's like, "Yeah, that's fine. Like I'll go." I said, "But before you leave, can you tell me so I can help this person? How did you even glom on in the first place?" And then I said, "Oh, well, they were doing this, that, and the other and dealing with this. And it was just kind of an easy food source. And, this is my job." Like, I was like, wow, this one's definitely getting minimum wage. So, um, like he was like, I'm cool. Like I'll use the back end door, like I'll see myself out. And that was a nice experience.
Yeah,
Obviously, I've had some very much the opposite, but what it taught me was, okay, not everything has to be that we go in guns blazing. A. And also, there are reasons that these things show up. And I had talked to the person for, a good hour of all the potential reasons how this thing came in. No, 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 none of that's going on. None of that has happened. And then the thing actually gave me the answer. And when I called the person on it, they were like, oh, yeah, yeah, that's right. I was messing with that. And I have been dealing with that or not dealing with it, quote unquote, which can allow negative stuff to come in. I've also had other things that I don't know exactly what they are, but they don't have negative intent. They just exist. And so if we're constantly going at this fight or flight with everything, you're not going to learn anything, right? Like ask questions. I mean, you dealt with a multitude of different entities come in, like when your reptilian visit came. What happened with that? Like, was there a message with it, or did it just show up and, give you the peace sign and eat your Cheetos? Like, what happened?
No, and I don't mind making a fool of myself in
You're
some people's
not
eyes
ever making a
because,
fool of yourself.
well, I mean, amongst us, we're of a certain milieu, but I think largely people see extrasensory things as either bunk or someone who's it's indicative of like someone who's a grifter. And I assure you, I'm not. Nothing I have is monetized, and um,
Same. And
I just
also,
have always had the
sir,
weirdest
like
background.
you're
Like
talking to
I
someone
do. I
who
see
sees
them
more stuff than humans probably on a daily basis. So you're in a safe space.
right, and I just and even in the unsafe spaces, I don't really care anymore. I
Good.
know when I see shadow people, which I do routinely, um, what they appear to be, what it means to me when I am seeing something like that, as well as the web that I discuss,
Mhm.
and I've mentioned in my poems sometimes, because I literally see connections to all things, figuratively and literally. So, and which is another reason why it's so hard for me to stay on a topic because I it literally it's everywhere. So, um, but I don't. It doesn't bother me. I see things that are vaguely humanoid. I see things that are not at all humanoid, and I had that reptilian encounter. I've had many encounters, including one that I think I, I don't want to use the word, but I will use the word vampire. Um, but I won't go into that one. But the reptilian thing um, started in a dream. So I was in this dream, and for some reason, every time it happens for me, I'm in this space where it's floor to ceiling windows, and on the outside of the windows is a jungle. In every case, in that case, it was the same. It was one of the first times I've ever had that dream, and there was this like blonde, gorgeous woman sitting at a desk, and for some reason, I knew that I was in a dream, but I also knew that I needed to pick up my kids from this daycare. I don't know why I thought it was a daycare, but that was my understanding in the dream. And this person begins to like come on to me sexually, and so right away I'm like with a red flag because I'm like, nah, this don't really happen for me. Nice try. So but I like so the I'm right away I'm skeptical, and that's when I wake up, when the skepticism really sets in, and I think this thing realized it was caught. I
Mhm.
wake up and I can't see anything but the ceiling, and I can't move anything but my eyeballs. So classic sleep paralysis, a lot of people would say, but I am looking around and I look to my right, and I was near on the edge of the bed where my right arm was almost hanging off. And when I move my eyes to the right, I'm seeing a silhouette of something laying next to me, which is impossible because there is no bed there. And it's got both my right arm and both of its arms like hugging that arm, and its body is laying alongside mine, and the skin looks vaguely burned or reptilian. is what I landed on. And I could also feel it speaking in my ear. I don't know what language. Couldn't tell you to this day. Um, and I could feel its breath. I mean, the thing was, it was real. Like when I say that this thing is real, I mean it is fucking real. Like, um,
Oh, you don't have to tell me. I know.
and it's, but like when I have to like say that for anyone listening because it sounds so bizarre, but you know, a psychologist would tell me that that's like, you know, maybe my spirit, my anima, and I think that there's a component to that. I think that really is a connection. Can my soul, as Jung would say it, my female soul, being that I'm a man, um, instantiate in like a physical form to sort of like awaken me to this thing? Why not? I don't dispute that. But the experience for me is very real. So it doesn't really change that. And so um, I know that sounds crazy to people who consider it such, but it's not something that I have the luxury of being able to care about because when you have like an encounter with things that are not of this world for so long, you begin to just know, you begin to, I don't know, to trust yourself more, to have, you know, I know that I'm not losing my mind. I know that I'm, sound body and mind. And, I reassure myself, even though sometimes I'm not as sure, or back then at least. So I don't know. I mean,
Try
with
having one
the,
of those experiences and it's shared with other people. And I've
oh
had that
yeah.
multiple times where both of
Mhm.
us saw it, both of us felt it, or multiple people saw and felt it. Um,
Mhm.
I had one when I was with my ex-husband and we were in bed and the TV was on. We used to fall asleep with the TV on. And I had kind of nodded out, as one of the people who isn't able to fall asleep in 3 minutes, uh, flat. Takes me like a good 2 hours, to start falling asleep, but it's very gradual when it starts happening. And so I'd kind of like just closed my eyes and like letting myself drift. And then all of a sudden my eyes open because I feel someone in between us. And I look down and there's
Mm.
this probably 3.5 foot woman, all in black hair, laying in between us with her hand on both of us. And I scream and jump up, and then obviously that wakes him up, and then he looks and goes,
Yeah.
"Who the bleep is that?" And then jumps out of the bed like he's gonna rip her out of the bed. And then both, I'm standing on the other side in the corner at this point, and and that's happened multiple times. So, you know, obviously we see how that ended up, so that explains a lot in retrospect, but at the time I was like, what the hell was that? So these things do happen. Now, in your experience with that, when you said it was talking and you don't know what it was saying, is there any part of understanding that you've been able to glean since?
No, I mean, if I had to guess, a gun to my head, I would say that that was something sent from the I that I am, that to get me on a path where I would discontinue that life of dissociation, of trying to fit in, of trying to convince the world and myself of my how normal I am. When in fact my life had been anything but. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to like speak too like flippantly about how what that meant because the meaning, as soon as you try to grab it, it just goes through your fingers like sand.
Yeah,
Um,
it can.
and it's like it's much more important that the experience remain with me. And again, I there was no like evil that I sensed. I'm very alert
Yeah.
at it when it happened. Like I was able to move my hands eventually, and then like get up, but I could feel it in the room, even though it was see appeared to be physically gone. I could feel it in the room, and so and I caught it several times trying to enter my dream again on the verge of sleep.
Mm.
So you see this like cycle of it like penetrating my psyche, which
Be
I'm so
interesting if
grateful for. And I know that sounds odd.
no, it would be interesting if you did a meditation and try to connect with it and be like, obviously you're trying to
Oh,
get
I
a
have.
message. Okay, good. And
Yeah.
has the message
Yeah.
become more clear?
Um, no, but it's so not in a way that's like, that I could explain to you. It's so it makes sense to me and in terms of like,
Well, that's all I
um,
care about. It doesn't need to make
the
sense.
symbolism of it. Like,
Good.
so what does the serpent represent to you?
Mm-hmm. Oh, are you literally
I'm
asking?
asking.
Sorry.
Like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the serpent represents more than a few things. It represents the duality, it represents part of the divine feminine. It also represents, when you're talking about the different chakras, Kundalini
Hmm.
energy. I mean,
Hmm.
I could go all over the map with the representation of it.
Right.
Sorry, I will edit that. Um, but when you think about a little bit deeper on what exactly that, you know, the serpent means multiple things. And it also kind of depends in what context it's in, right? So if I'm with a group of women
Mhm.
and the snake theme pops up, and let's say we're talking about some real rough stuff that we've been going through, right? And we're trying to like help be there for each other, but also strengthen each other. I'm thinking,
Mhm.
okay, that's kind of Lilith energy. That dark feminine that needs to come up and help. And Lilith is not evil. Again, duality and the
Oh
oneness of all
yeah.
things.
Oh
And
yeah.
understanding that that dark feminine comes forward, especially as a female, when we have kind of hit a part of our lives where we're not going to take any shit anymore. Like we're done. And so we're stopping it. And it's kind of like that divine feminine rage, I call it. Like when we've hit our limit. You flip the bitch switch. um if it came up, let's say, and I was around mixed genders and it came up and perhaps we were trying to do something in wellness, I would think, okay, this is talking about energy through chakra work. We need to maybe take a look at how the energy's flowing, type situation, and or is it medicine, right? Literal, like the medicine staff with the snake going around it. I'm
Could
losing
be.
words. Love that for
Yeah,
me.
it's quite
Uh,
close.
yeah, thank you. That.
Yeah.
So everything is in context. I mean, so I used to tell people, okay, sometimes a curtain is just a curtain, right? So especially in paranormal investigation and stuff, sometimes a curtain billowing in the breeze, it doesn't automatically mean that your dead grandma's there haunting you. Sometimes it's you left the window open and there's a breeze moving the damn curtain, right? Investigate.
Right.
But if it's moving on
Yeah.
its own and there's a certain feeling behind it, whether it's fear or all of a sudden it's joy or it's euphoria or something else, all of that needs to go into trying to figure out what it is. So there's not a one size fits all. Shadow people.
Right.
For myself, when I see shadow people, for me, shadow people are just they're from another dimension. Doesn't mean that they're bad.
And when we look at them, that doesn't mean that we're seeing what they are. And so
Exactly.
the same way that like a bug can't really perceive you, It can only perceive the you that it looks at, uh, and it's with its faculties. I mean, like if you, it's like the allegory of like the blind men all trying to describe an elephant from its different parts. Are
Hmm.
they going to ever arrive at the fact that it's an elephant? I mean, you, it's,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I mean, I guess I asked about the serpent because to me, it means the subconscious. It means the underworld, and it meant it was ubiquitous in history that it was linked with everything chthonic. So, and literally because they would transverse from the water and the earth and caves and like they would literally they were the masters of that. There's also a relationship with them in the trees as guardians of the trees. Um, but so, and you think about that, that's the actual uh, Kundalini, right? Like your axis mundi in your body,
Hmm.
and the serpent writhes up it. That's this is the Asclepius. These are symbolic representations of what the serpent stands for. It always stood for fertility, and why? Because everything that like indigenous people, for example, of this continent, uh, got from the ground agriculturally, anything below that ground they considered the underworld, the below world. Then you had the above world, and then you had the middle world, they called it, which is where we are. And so when you see these, when you look at that metaphorically, though, that's your subconscious. That's your, and when we say subconscious, oh, it's all in your head. No, not necessarily, because if you believe like I do, I'm I would say somewhat hermetic adjacent in my belief of what is fundamental um, in this what we call reality, and I think it's consciousness. I'm not educated enough to make that claim 100%, but I will say that that's what I'm sort of like finding to be true in my case. And so I have to look at things like if consciousness is fundamental and your subconscious carries the weight of generations before you. You know what I mean? Like Jung talked about the spirit of an age versus the spirit of the depths. Right
Hmm.
now, we can be at war with the spirit of our age, or we can be congruent with it. We can be sort of in lockstep with it. But the spirit of the depths adds a counterweight to all of that, whatever you are. So I think the serpent represents that being, that liminal being. This is why I think Christ was associated with the serpent. This is why I think the serpent in the Garden of Eden was sort of like that. Jason Giorgiani calls it the Prometheus, you know,
Hmm.
um, bringing us the awareness and the knowledge. But that's why I asked, because I want to know what people think about the serpent. I want to know what people think about that sort of reptilian, um, just liminal like idea, that feeling you get even when you encounter something like that on a regular basis. Like it's primal. It's something that is in your subconscious that it instantiates in life in a lot of ways. And so for me, that's what that experience with I think was with that reptilian being, and um, I'm so glad it happened in a way because I landed on this fucking ride, and I love it.
Aw.
But at times you think you're sort of losing it. The synchronicities begin to happen um, to
Oh
lead
yeah.
you in a certain way. I never wanted to channel things, and I even hate to use that word to say that I am sometimes when I'm writing things, but I have no other word for it. Uh, and yeah, but I think that paying attention to the fact that you know every culture had a serpent sort of component to it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's in Africa, there's stone serpents that are thousands and thousands of years old. There's like the Buddhist and Hindu serpent sculptures on rock for the Nagas. Even Buddha, when he was being enlightened, he was being surrounded by a serpent.
Well,
Lord
and even with,
Vishnu rests on a serpent, right?
yeah.
So,
And then even with the Aztecs, where, the serpent would come with the beings from above. And then you even have
yeah,
with
the
some
feathered
of the
serpent.
Norse mythology of the world serpent. And
Hmm.
so if that permeates every single culture, there's some there, right?
Hmm.
So what are we missing? Now, the way that you described for the serpents, that for me is the crows, because they go between realms.
Hmm.
And, as we exist here in these physical manifestations of bodies, I believe that we exist on 7 levels below and 77 levels above. And so there are times when sometimes higher or lower parts of you come through. Like you were saying, that it could be an excess part of you coming through, whether it was to offer a hug, or whether it was to offer comfort or support, or just a reminder, or to help get you on your way. But, when it comes to these experiences, I don't see any of these as just, oh, they're arbitrary or just because. Everything
No.
happens for a reason. These things would
Yep.
not take the time and energy needed, nor would they bother to show up and manifest in these different ways if it weren't to propel forward growth in some way or course shift in some way.
Correct.
And I,
Oh
I
yeah.
feel like it's all about what you do with the information and how deeply you want to look into it in order to figure out, what does this mean for me? Now, it's very easy to, throw it on the internet like, this is my experience. What is this, guys? And you're going to get
Hmm.
200 different opinions from everybody from different backgrounds. And I'm always going to be the one asking the question, well, what does this mean to you? What does this symbolize to you? Because you're the one that it happened to. I might know what
Hmm.
it means to me, but it didn't happen to me, right? I mean, unless it did, in which case, okay, now we need to find common ground. Like, what does this mean to both of us? Which
Yeah.
I've had
Yeah.
happen
The shared
before.
experience.
Yeah, with multiple people, where I know what it means to me, but then I've got to ask them, hey, what does this mean to you? Like, for instance, if you and I had a shared experience, obviously we're coming from two different backgrounds and what certain things are going to mean. So you have to knock your heads together and figure out what's the common thing, what makes sense for both of us. And once you
Mm.
find that, then okay, move forward and explore from there. And sometimes also you can get really caught up in the details, the synchronicity thing that you mentioned. I mean, I had that make my head spin once, and finally I told Spirit, okay, fine, until it happens 3 times in a row, I don't want to hear about it, because I'm feel like I'm chasing my tail. And that can happen, right? Like, anybody in this space, I'm just going to tell you, like, we've all had it happen to us. And then stuff would start happening in threes, and it got so ridiculous, ending in this car accident, that I was like, okay, so maybe I need to like tone back the three thing and just pay attention to
Yeah. Yeah.
what actually matters, and like feel it out a little bit more. Be a little more present. I know for myself, I definitely need to focus on being more present, because I am in so many different places, literally and figuratively, at the same time. And I'm on so many
Mhm.
different projects and working with different people and on so many different things and working with spirit. I mean, I told you Hades popped in the other day, and I was just like, what are we
Mm.
doing, boss? And it
Yeah.
was very, very interesting how that work ended up turning out. I thought it was going to go one direction, and here I'm driving in my car. I'm on the way to an appointment. Absolutely nothing whatsoever triggered this random memory. but it was this really awful memory that I had forgotten, which is nice that my brain was able to forget that. And
Yeah.
so like it bring back and like the scene played out and it was very much almost like I was watching a movie. Like the memory played out and I had no emotional attachment to it and I just went, "Huh." And then I look over and sensed Hades in my passenger seat and I kind of
Oh shit.
felt him smirk and he said, "See, you lived through that and you were able to forget it." Like,
Hmm.
as in, you're going to be okay. Bad things happen to multiple people, and sometimes they're really, really bad, but you can heal and get over it to the point where you didn't even remember it happened. To quote The Hangover, did you
Yeah.
die though? And not that he was,
Right. That's such a, oh my God, I love that. It's like
no. Oh my
I
God.
always heard like, don't tempt the trigger. Do not give them any. You said like I wanted in threes, and the trickster was like, "Oh, so huh?" And
Uh-huh.
then it's
Yeah.
like as soon as you're sure that trickster, which I believe is a part of all of us,
Yeah.
um, maybe it has like you could call Mercury like the historical or mythological like figure of it, Hermes, Mercury. But I think we all have a component in our psyche that's that way. That's like part of the I am who will challenge you and drag you through a mile's worth of shit just to arrive at one single insight.
Yeah.
It's just you look at it like this is fucking unnecessary, but like, is it though? I mean, you need that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that
Well,
gravity.
and I did, right? Like, I mean, the three thing when Anansi was coming around and then ending up with an African orange tarantula in my upstairs bedroom next to my bed,
Mm,
which makes absolutely no sense, and then that thing lived in the vacuum in front of my house for 3 days and then finally disappeared. And I was like, have fun, buddy. And after that,
mm.
it was like, okay, so we need to negotiate terms because
Yeah.
like I get it. And that you can do with anything in your life, whether it's with the spirit world or with people. Like, okay, if something's not working, we should be talking and negotiating terms and figuring
Hmm.
out what works for us. You opened at the beginning saying that you're autistic. So there are certain things that you need from other people to communicate with you so that you feel like you're understanding, but also that you're being respected, right? And that you're able to get through without just people being
Hmm.
mean, as I require
Right.
from people certain things as well. And so, I have a thing with everyone that I'm friends with. I'm like, listen, I want you to be honest with me. If you need to call me on my shit, or you need to tell me something, or if I ask your opinion, like, don't lie, be truthful, because I'm always going to do that with you. So I want you to do that back. And like,
Yeah.
don't be scared
I
of
think
me.
this is why I disagree like directly with people sometimes in that way, and it probably comes off as like what the fuck, but like it's more of like a it's more of like it's gonna be back there and it's gonna bother me if I don't like caveat something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if I don't add an addendum to it and just say, well, maybe, but it's not like computer logic for me. Like you said, like everyone has a certain need, and I would say on its inverse, I recognize that I'm not always going to get that,
Yeah.
and so I have to be able to compensate and read the cues for myself for what that is, and because I've had people come back after like months of I didn't really hear from them, and they're like, I had that wrong about what we talked about, and I don't even fucking remember. I'm like, like this was not a non-issue for me. But I
But for
guess
them, it
like
was
my
big.
right and my delivery can be that such that like, and I will always own like No, if you how I believe this from my days in therapy, and I'm still in therapy, that how you feel is valid.
Yeah.
How you feel is important and is valid, and don't let anybody tell you that it isn't. Even if what you're feeling, it doesn't mean it's rational. It does
That.
not mean that it's rational, but it does mean it's valid. And we can talk about like how to reason through a thing, but like totally valid all the time. You can't say someone isn't feeling a thing because yes, the fuck they are. Uh,
I mean, unless
but
they're an emotionally manipulative person, but hopefully that's
yeah,
already established.
well, this is
But
where the reason comes in.
well, that's a
I
big
know,
hyper
JJ.
pit,
Sometimes
buddy.
people won't listen to reason.
Because there are
Yeah,
some people
it's
who
true.
know how to emotionally manipulate and they do it deliberately in order to get their way. And we used to
Yeah.
call them spoiled brats back in the day, right? They'd be the one who would throw a big tantrum if they didn't get their way. And so everyone just gave them their way because no one wanted to deal with the big fat tantrum.
Hmm.
Um, and so fast forward to now they're adults and then they've learned how to manipulate their spouses or their family or their kids by throwing a big conniption. And so everyone just lets them have their way when, now everyone has to tiptoe around them. I am listen, I wouldn't like I do, let me put this eloquently. I would not enjoy being like that because to me, you're not having a truthful and valid experience with other people. You don't know how you're truly perceived. You don't know where you truly stand with people. I know that I'm very direct. I know I can be intimidating. I'm very much a type A. I own that. Like, I know it. That being said, I also have one of the most giant hearts, and, I'm extremely kind and compassionate and caring. But because I can
Hmm.
be so kind, compassionate, and caring, I have to have that other side of me that, like, kind of puts the hammer down at times because
Hmm.
you can get walked on, right? It's all about balance. The pendulum is
Sure.
always swinging. And so having boundaries is important. I have a lot of friends who are autistic and all over the spectrum. And the one thing that I get from most of them is I really appreciate how I am very direct with them. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, huh, I do have a lot of you in my life. They're like, yeah, but it's because we know where we stand with you at all times. Like you don't sugarcoat it. I'll be the person if we're in public and you're doing something super weird that's like gonna get us in trouble or start a fight. I'm gonna be the person to pull you back and be like, hey, come with me. Stop. But I'll also be the first person who will step in and be like, hey, you're misconstruing things. He doesn't mean it that way. Like, calm down, and try
Yeah.
and dispel something. I don't even know why we got on this, but again, that's part of knowing yourself, right? So if you know your strengths,
Because
you
it's
know
the
what your weak.
manipulation, right?
Yeah, and then the emotional manipulators, when you say every feeling's valid and we have to respect that, yeah, but then there's also people who will exploit that. Thank you for bringing
Right.
it back
There
on
has to
point.
be. You're right. So that's that. So there's the line, is that they have to actually be feeling that in order for that
That,
to be valid. So,
yes.
like, I think I would push back and say that probably 90% of people that do this, it's a subconscious response from their brain patterns into their nervous system. I think that the reward system of our bodies sort of like learn that before our consciousness does. And
Mm,
so
mhm,
that is further proof that people need to sort of get into a CBT or dialectical behavioral therapy situation where they're learning, especially group therapy. Definitely, I keep telling people this: go to group therapy right now, yesterday, go now, and because when you see the wheels in someone's head moving, and they start to grasp some of the concepts of cognitive distortion and all these fallacies that we are going through, and all of these dysregulations that we put upon ourselves and that we refuse to acknowledge. When you see the gears turn in someone else, it has an inward effect on you. You say, oh, I do this when X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
So I think most of the emotional manipulation is like there is a subset who are psychopaths who
Yeah.
know what they're doing, and I think it's the extreme minority of people, but it's there. But I would say like
I think there,
I am
unfortunately,
learning to
there
tell the
are
difference
more.
when someone is
Yeah. Sorry, I think there are more sociopaths and psychopaths in the world than we like to believe and think. I also feel that we have a lot more
sure.
narcissism in this world, and a lot of people want to sugarcoat it with, oh, well, I'm just feeling this way, so this is how I deal with my feelings. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're emotionally manipulating other people, or you're emotionally blackmailing, or you're just making a big fat excuse as to why you don't have to do any work, but everyone else has to tiptoe around you and all of your triggers, quote unquote, even though they're not triggers. They're just you don't want to be bothered because you don't want to do the hard work. And I know that sounds
Right.
harsh, and you're obviously much sweeter in your delivery than I am, but I do agree. I had a conversation today, actually earlier, very random, where we were talking about therapy. And I said, therapy is a good example. You're going to have one person who you say, hey, therapy, it's only $10 a session, and they could totally afford it. And they'll say, that's too much because they
Right.
don't want it, right? They don't want to do the hard work. They don't really care. They want to just keep doing whatever negative patterns they're doing. And then you'll have someone
You're
else
not
who,
going to take it seriously in that way.
yeah, and you'll have somebody else who probably doesn't need it as much, if at all. And you'll say, okay, therapy, but it's $1,000 an hour. And they'll say, okay, I'll pay it because it's worth it to me to grow, to heal, and to do better. And that's kind of where we are in the world. And it's sad in some aspects, but this is how you can weed people also out in your life of who really respects your time, your energy, and wants to understand you and understand themselves in turn.
Agreed. But I don't like I don't like I guess I don't have like a system for that. And I say that like it has to be pretty dramatic for me to cut someone off. I more have a thing where it's like I have learned how to sort of suss out what is a manipulation and what is a genuine concern or something like that. And with if people are not willing to do any sort of like inward reflection, um, that's ultimately on them. And I have compassion for that. And like you say, it's kindness, but really it's just a knowledge of like watching so many people come to that point. This is why I'm an advocate for group therapy, because you learn how different people respond to the concepts. When I see somebody who has like a cognitive disability, even,
Mhm.
and they are learning the path of acceptance, when they bring out the conversation about acceptance, it doesn't matter if you're wrong or right. It's can you accept it? When that is the lesson, that is at the forefront. And you can say, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. You can be right, but that doesn't, I mean, that's only relative to yourself.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole world around you. No one is the main character here. So I think that's where people get lost on that. It's like, um, excuse me. that's uh that's kind of like what we're dealing with is like I watched so many people take it seriously and I watched other people not. And that is where I came to like esoteric studies. A lot of people don't realize that like it was group therapy, and I would see the therapist have a badge on, right, and
Mhm.
there were like these forms on it. And I learned later that these are um, the platonic solids, essentially, all down the thing. And then the Asclepius, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what is that? And I did this like tremendous dive through therapy, and towards the end, I spoke to my therapist and was like, "You realize that you're performing alchemy?"
Witchcraft.
And right, I mean, and she's like, "What? I don't know what that what." Like, I'm like, that's essentially the same thing. And I had her like, I didn't tell her to do it, but she came back and pulled me aside and was like, "There's a lot that's the same." Of what? Like, yeah, that's. I mean, I know. I
A
mean,
ton.
I know I'm in here because you know I was losing it, but like, and it couldn't have happened had I not watched people come to these concepts, these therapeutic concepts, as like um, a foundation. And I think that that's where it is. You have to have that foundation, and you have to, again, we should be teaching this in kindergarten and before that, because
Agree.
then you don't have to deal with the manipulation.
Yep.
Then people know.
Yeah. And it also is something that, I think we're getting as a society further away from it because there's a lot more awareness, especially online. I don't know if it's just me and the algorithm, but I I I've been seeing a ton more information of, red flags and how to suss out certain things and this and that. And I'm like, this is great information. Where the hell was this like 20 years ago? But that being said, what I'm also hoping is as society, we are getting away from putting females in this position where we are taught from an early age to ignore all of those flags because it's our duty, quote unquote, in order to put up with them. And I tend to find that males, since typically males aren't brought up with that same, not all, because there are definitely some situations where they are, but men tend to have better boundaries because from a younger age, you guys weren't told you had to put up with that as much as females. And I'm hoping as a society in full that we are teaching our kids that, and that our generations coming forward won't have the big split in between the two.
Right. I would say that like I I don't really have a comment except like that they so as a man, I'm encouraged not to come forward with those with like a violation of that. So, and this is imposed by society at large. But like even as a boy, I am a victim of ritual abuse. So, and that's something I don't talk about ever. This is the first time anybody has really, if you're listening to this now, this is the first time I've really talked about this with any depth. But I was someone from that background and am. And so, one thing that seems in my study of that ubiquitous is the need to not be seen as that. So, whatever data I gather, I have to filter out like my experiential data with my friends that I speak to, and I gather with other men who um, have these experiences, and nobody says a fucking thing. Nobody, no, we're in a situation where we can't even admit that as men that we have had these wrongs that like and it's honestly laughed at. The when's the last time like in media you've seen um men and it be like a grape joke, and like the whole theater's busting up,
Yep.
and it's like you and I believe me, I make those jokes like I have some of the raunchiest humor ever, but there's a staunch like
There's a firm line.
delineation and like when it's programming and when we're like being funny. So, I think that like as a whole, we don't perceive men as capable of being um, victims to that.
Right.
And so when it happens, it must be funny. And some of those movies are funny. Like it's like obviously, it's meant to be in jest, but is it? I mean, we're in the persuasion
Yeah,
generation. So
I see what you're saying, and on that subject, I have seen a lot more come out lately, like especially with, the boys who are in junior high, right? And then the hot teacher and, 12-year-old boy were like having an affair or whatever. And I'm starting to see when people repost these articles, now they're saying, yeah, that was not right. This isn't like a oh attaboy anymore. Like that
right,
was the same. If that was a young girl and a male teacher who was older, everyone would be having a big difference of opinion about it. And
right,
so, and I mean, look at how long it took for people to actually come out about the Catholic Church and the stuff that was being done to the altar boys, and how
yeah,
much shame, that those men had to come out, and let's face it, the media was not kind to them when it started. And
mm-mm,
so being able to talk about it because, oh, it's a man, so you guys are going to take care of yourselves. Yeah, but also, like, depending on what age you were, you're not always
yeah,
capable. And I've also known people who were grown and had awful stuff happen to them. And,
yeah.
as they've said, I wasn't in a situation where I was capable. And that has to be respected and understood the same way as if it was a female. And again,
Should be.
same thing. Yeah, it should. And the same thing, whereas females, we shouldn't just automatically put up with certain stuff because we're told, oh, we need to get married, or you're going to be a spinster, or we need to have kids, or like whatever. You know what? Just live your life.
Right.
Just live your life and be happy and figure out what works for you. Obviously,
Yeah,
there's
that comes
no
down
wrong.
to the thing of like acknowledging people as human
Yes.
instead of like their respective gender or religion or whatever. That's like my big thing is I try to look at people as human. And so
Hmm.
as human, we all have the potential and the probability to be the worst of us and the best of us.
And that comes
And
back
we
to when you
strive
know,
for that middle path,
yes. And when you
right?
know yourself and then you understand you're part of the all, you understand you're connected to everyone and everything. And whether it's my brother, my sister, or my them, it doesn't matter. It's a fellow human, it's a fellow being,
Right.
it's a fellow entity. Where why,
Yes.
why would we want anything bad to happen to them, regardless of what we feel about where they come from or their actions, etc.?
And that's something they won't tell you about. That's 100% right. But they won't tell you about that um, sort of reconciliation. But they will do. Like if you're familiar with wisdom traditions, they will show you a serpent. That's the real thing that they're not telling you is how does a serpent move, right? In a
Hmm.
wave,
Yeah.
in a wave, from one side of a thing to the other side of a thing. But where is the head always? It's in a middle path.
Like the
This is where,
pendulum's always swinging, right? From one
right.
side to the other, but there's always the middle ground, which we're hoping
Hmm.
for. Sine wave and the Hogarth curve, which you and I had talked about. So, Art 101, I don't know if it's still taught or not, but Art 101, the Hogarth curve is considered the most beautiful thing in all of art, and it is literally like an S.
Hmm.
And so, if you notice in a lot of the older paintings, when someone was modeling like a model, there was always an S with their body that was being
Yeah,
repeated because it was considered to be beautiful.
it's the universal symbol for motion, right? And that's a
Yes,
beautiful thing.
I love it. I appreciate you so much for coming on. I know you have a hard stop because of kids. Um, but I just want to thank you again for taking time and chatting with me. Hopefully, we can do it again soon.
Yeah, we can do it
And
whenever.
oh, I love it. Because we got
Yeah, I'm
way
ready.
more to go into. So, please tell
Oh
everyone
yeah,
where
we could
we
get
can
lost.
find you and how we can support you.
If you want to find me, I'm in.
Not
Uh,
physically.
yeah, I work over around the way. You can just come by and bring me
One
lunch.
GPS
No,
locations.
I do want people to read like my writing, so the Substack um, is always there. If you want to go check out Mythic Scribe, do that. Nothing I have is monetized, so everything is free. Um, I wouldn't monetize it except to, you know, cover a cost of something that I had to pay out. But even then, I don't even do that. So, um, I don't want to lose that inspiration. And I feel like doing that compromises things. So, yeah, if you feel like chatting with me, I'm also in JJ's Discord. If you get an invite to that, I'm not as active on that as I should be, but I
There's
also
no
get
should.
overwhelmed easily.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. No should. There's just when you feel like it.
Right. Should statement.
Yeah.
You're right. Stay away from that. But yeah, I mean, I'm on the Instagram chasing mound builders. If you want to see like mound builder associated things, I try to do that among the things.
You have a
Create photo
YouTube,
edits.
right? As well.
I do. I haven't been active on that hardly at all, but like I do.
So
There
are
are
the
some things,
majority of your
including
videos on Instagram or TikTok?
it's most of it isn't videos anymore. It's mostly like I do have some reels, but mostly just still photographs. I do some slides. I do like most of it is paired with some sort of writing. I do a lot of video or photo edits where I will take photos and use like symmetry tools to flip them, and um, it has to do with like being led by the muse myself, as far as what I'm writing and what I'm feeling, and I'll see it in an image, and then I'll flip it, and then I'll figure out how it pairs with something I have in my mind as a concept, and it's always there.
And I
And I
can
even
tell you,
find,
I've seen some and they're beautiful and they're deep. They aren't just your average picture that's been altered. They make you think. And, maybe part of this is because obviously, we're friends and I'm connected and I can kind of feel into what you were putting into the photo, but definitely worth a look or three.
well, thank you. I
um,
appreciate that,
no,
and for
I
you like
mean
bringing
it.
me on the chat with you.
I'm not like I don't make false compliments, but yes.
I
I
know.
am so appreciative. I will have all of his information in the show notes for this. If you already know him, give him a shout out that you know and love him. If you don't know him, please like, subscribe all of his stuff, take a little look. And the Substack, his writings are beautiful, and we need to support our authors out there in short form and long form. So I would appreciate that. Thank you, lovely beings, for being with us. I appreciate all of you. May you learn, may you grow.